So I want to talk about what is the most important aspect of code enforcement, this most important concept in code enforcement, and that is really putting some enforcement behind code enforcement. All across the state, cities, municipalities, counties are sitting on literally hundreds of millions of dollars in liens against property. Those liens against property often begin contributing to the blight rather than fixing the blight or resolving the underlying code case. And here's why. Property owners, when those liens are junked up against there and they don't have an effective or efficient means to reduce them, or the policies aren't clear, then they walk away from the properties. More importantly, the municipality, the county, the government entity has an obligation to the taxpayers and to the stakeholders in that community to be making sure that code enforcement is helping to move properties forward, is helping to help the individual property owner and the stakeholders around that property put that property into constructive use. If we're just going up in code enforcement, slapping a lien against a property and then walking away and hoping that somebody calls us 5 years or 10 years from now, we're not doing our job for that property, for those adjacent property owners, and for the whole community of stakeholders, because we're not going out there and actually enforcing that code. Remember, the concept here is we have an obligation in code enforcement to be responsive not just to the property owner, not just to the adjacent property owners, but to the whole community. And what being responsive and assertive and proactive in code enforcement means is we have a concept to move that lien to resolution from the moment it's recorded. Never just record a lien and walk away. That lien, from the moment it's recorded, frankly, before it recorded, we need to have a plan to get that lien resolved, to get money back in the taxpayer's pocket, particularly when we spent money, we come out of pocket for demolition, or we're mowing the grass, or we're out there doing enforcement. When we've got hard costs especially, we are doing a disservice to taxpayers and the whole of the community by not engaging in an enforcement mechanism immediately. So that means, particularly if it's a demolition case or a case where we got money out of the pocket, what the department needs to be doing, and this needs to be coordinated obviously with whether it's council or commission or political official, there needs to be an organized and a strategy behind collecting that money immediately. So that means before we fire up the bulldozers, before we engage in that really assertive collection effort, we know what the plan for that lien is. We know that this property is a corporate-owned property, a corporation, an LLC that's abandoned the state. We know we're going after that. If it's an estate property, we know that we're going to pull a title search and we're going to file a foreclosure after that. If it's an individual that owns the property, we're going to understand whether or not we're dealing with a homestead or something else. But again, think about most of your cases. The very worst code cases are not homestead property. We want to kind of steer away from those, obviously. What we should be focusing on in code enforcement collection, and particularly when we're thinking about revitalization, is those properties that are the worst offenders in the community, which are vacant, which are abandoned, which are LLCs that are not contributing members of our community. They've walked away and they've abandoned that property. It is our job collectively to put that property into constructive use. If the property owner's walked away from it, if it's blighted, if it's abandoned, we can no longer sit there and look at that blighted and abandoned property, and we should never just be slapping up liens against the property and then sitting back and waiting for years for that lien to be collected. No. We fire up the bulldozers, we go out and do the enforcement activity, we mow the grass. When we record that lien, we immediately go into a collection mode so that we start to recover that money for the taxpayers and the citizens of the community.